My wife cheated with her two cousins, but as a police officer, I plan and execute a revenge that drives her crazy. I don't care what happens to her. I earned the title of Closer Cop when I was on patrol with our local police department. I was the rookie on the block. All the other officers were veterans and, practically, were set in their ways. They were a great group of guys, and they all made an effort to help me learn the trade, but they were far from go-getters. I, on the other hand, was the go-getter par excellence. I used to take 1 or 2 cold case files home with me and work on them in my spare time. I was taking a criminology class offered by the State University, 65 kilometers south of us. I used the new techniques I was learning to review those old cases. Hopefully, I solved 4 cold cases during my first 6 months on the job. That was the positive side. The negative side was the 2 nights a week away from Estella while I was in the classroom, but she was a very understanding wife. She knew that what I was learning now would pay off in the future. She was a nurse at our local hospital. They were short on nurses, so she was able to alter her schedule to maximize our time together. We both came from middle-class families. We had our future well planned. We would buy a house with some land so we could garden, have horses, and maybe other livestock. We would have 2 or 3 children, but that would come after spending a few years together, just the 2 of us. It was a great plan. It was our dream. To make a long story short, those 4 cases I solved caught the attention of Sheriff Jim Stevenson. I found myself sitting in his office, listening to an incredible offer. He wanted me to work with his investigation group. For all intents and purposes, I would be a detective. The downside was that I would have to report to his office, located at the county seat. Instead of a 17 kilometers round trip to work, I would be driving 43 kilometers. The upside was more money and my own assigned patrol vehicle to take home every night. I was also allowed to drive it to my criminology classes. The icing on the cake was when they said they would pay me for the time I spent in the classroom and cover my tuition. As much as I hated to leave all my colleagues and friends at the local police, the sheriff made me an offer I could not refuse. The atmosphere at the county headquarters could only be called competitive. There was no doubt that my rapid promotion was resented by at least some of my coworkers. I tried to keep a low profile while working more diligently than ever. Most of my time was dedicated to cold case assignments. As before, I continued to work on those cases at home. Generally, I would read everything our office had available on a particular case, memorizing as much as possible. Then, when I had some time or an idea came to me, I would enter it into my evidence application. At the end of the day, I would transfer my thoughts to a USB drive to take with me to work the next day. It was that routine that led to something that changed everything. It started on a Wednesday morning, when I could not find my USB drive. I looked everywhere. There was no drive. I was sure I had left it on my desk, but it was not there. Then, it occurred to me. It had probably fallen off the desk and into the trash can. The trash can was empty. Then I remembered that Estelle had taken a white trash bag to the bin last night. She had already left for work, so it was up to me to go through the trash to find my lost drive. I was hoping the white bag would stand out like a sore thumb among all the black trash bags, but I had no such luck. I began the tedious task of going through the bags. Finally, 3 rows deep, I found the white bag inside a black bag. What the hell? Why did she put that bag inside another bag? Why not just throw it on top? The good news is that my drive was there. The bad news is that it was not alone. That sunny Wednesday morning, that midweek day, was about to become one of the darkest days of my life. After putting the USB drive in my pocket, I noticed a clear sandwich bag near the bottom. Inside the sandwich bag, I found 6 small bags, better known as condoms. They were all filled with an easily identifiable white substance. You do not need to be a detective to realize that this was an important clue. You do not need a lab to identify the white substance. It does not take long for a trusting husband to know that his marriage and his life, as he knows them, are probably over. I opened my patrol car and put the bag of condoms in my evidence cooler. Then, I began to reflect on my next move. My first inclination was an immediate confrontation, but Estella could just deny everything. She could say that the neighborhood kids probably used our trash bin for nefarious purposes. I could counter that with the observation that the white bag contained other items that I had discarded from my desk. What are the odds that those kids would take the time to go 3 levels deep in the bin, open one of our trash bags, and put their trash in a white bag that contained waste from my desk? Of course, she could resort to a statement like, Anything is possible when kids are hiding incriminating sexual evidence. I quickly determined that I would need to employ a more foolproof method. I would need to use professional surveillance equipment, strategically placed in the house. That would allow me to determine if this was an isolated incident or an ongoing affair. I was not even sure that affair was the right word. Installing the right equipment would allow me to identify not only the right word, but probably the participants as well. I could have the contents of the condoms tested for DNA, if that was necessary. I was making a list of what I would need to do when my phone rang. Deputy Jake Robbins, I answered. It was the boss, Sheriff Stevenson, calling to inform me about a possible breakthrough in one of our cold cases. He asked me if I knew where the Luck Ion Ranch was. When I replied that I had been there several times, he told me that Luck had discovered Alice Reynolds' car on his property. Sheriff Stevenson asked me to go there as soon as possible. He told me he was putting me in charge of that cold case, which had suddenly been reopened and was red hot. This would be the first time in my 2 years as a deputy that I would be the lead investigator on a case. I was honored that the chief had chosen me to handle such a challenging and well-known case. As I headed to the ranch, my thoughts about the condoms faded and were replaced by memories of the day Luke called me. Suddenly, he wanted to talk about the murder of Holly Sairman, which was another of our cold cases. I arranged a meeting with him for later that day. It turned out to be very fortunate. He surprised me with his opening line. He wanted to report that he had participated in a foursome with Holly Sairman at her house. Although I knew that such activity could lead to murder, I had to proceed with caution. The activity, however depraved, is generally not a crime. I asked him if it was consensual. He said that she was a willing participant at first, but less so as the activities progressed. Saying that, he assured me that she never asked them to stop or even to pause. She had simply lost her enthusiasm over time. He went on to say that it had bothered him so much that he finally confessed everything to his brother, who was the minister of a local church. His brother had advised him to seek me out and tell me what had happened. I told him I appreciated the information, but nothing he had confessed to was illegal, not as long as she was not forced to have relations against her will. It was then that he told me the other two participants were Stephen Barber and Bill Raymore. Both he and Bill had been there at Stephen's invitation. I found it a bit strange that Stephen, identified as Holly's boyfriend, would initiate such an act, but it was not a crime. I had to get to the heart of the matter, so I asked Luke if he had been involved in Holly's poisoning. He said he would never do such a thing. I asked him if he suspected that the other participants might have been involved in her murder. He said he had no reason to think so. At the time, I thought the call was just an attempt by Luke to clear his conscience and would not have much impact on our cold case. Wrong. I had questioned Stephen, Holly's boyfriend, early in the case and ruled him out. I was also satisfied that, although Luke was distressed by what happened, he did not rise to the level of a suspect. All that was left to check was the other participant, Bill Raymore. I made a mental note to investigate him the next day. The next day, I conducted extensive research on Mr. Raymore. Apart from some evidence that he was not a good person, there was nothing to implicate him in the murder. It was when I started investigating his wife, Ellie Raymore, that I struck gold. Before moving here a year ago, she had worked for a chemical company on the Gulf Coast. After a few phone conversations with managers and supervisors at the plant where she had worked, I had my suspect. She had access to the same chemical that the coroner had identified as the cause of Holly's death. The managers at the chemical plant said that while they kept a close watch on products that could be used recreationally, they were not as concerned about poisonous byproducts like the one I was asking about. Just 3 days after my visit with Luke, I was part of a team sent to confront Ellie Raymore. We arrived prepared with a search warrant for her house. She met us at the door. When I showed my badge and told her we were charging her with the murder of Holly Sairman, she surprised us all. I was wondering when you idiots would figure this out, she sneered. Let me just say this, that sanctimonious bitch deserved what she got. Thus, thanks to my visit with Luke Yan, we had solved a cold case. I received most of the credit, but it really belonged to Luke. Now here I am, preparing to talk to Luke again. This is about another cold case. This is probably the most talked about case. It involves an older woman named Ollie Reynolds and a young man named Jerry Gibson who disappeared on the same night. She had been his teacher in a special university program to teach young people with mental disabilities how to handle the tasks of a handyman. Her teaching took place in the residence she shared with her husband, Alan. There was a lot of speculation at the time about a student and his teacher disappearing on the same day. Had they become romantically involved? Did they run off together somewhere? Or was it just a super strange coincidence? Those questions were never answered, and the case soon went cold. Today could mark a new beginning in solving that mystery. Would it not be something if Luke could contribute to this case as he did in Holly's sermons? If so, we should consider putting him on the payroll. As I drove to Luke's house, the CSI team vehicles arrived from the other direction. Luke came out to meet us. As we shook hands and made introductions, the CSI team leader asked if the car was easily accessible. Luke told them it was hidden in plain sight. He reminded us that the multi-vehicle dealership he now ran had been in the family for years. It had been a Ford agency until the recent expansion. During all those years, they had traded in many vehicles. They sold some on their used car lot and sent others to auction, but many of them ended up in a car graveyard in the middle of his ranch. Often, collectors would come to see those vehicles. It was one of those collectors who commented on the almost new car that was among all those classic vehicles. He had asked how much they were asking for that 2-year-old white Buick. Luke went out to take a look. The doors were locked, but the license plates were still in place. He made a quick call, asked a quick question, and was amazed by the answer. He made another call. He called the sheriff. After hearing Luke's story, we followed him to the car. 10 minutes after arriving at the car, the CSI team had opened the doors and the trunk. They found a couple of empty glasses in the cup holders, but the car seemed to have few clues. There was no blood or other significant findings. Most importantly, there were no bodies. I asked Luke to think of a place on the ranch where bodies could be hidden. He searched his memory for a couple of minutes. Then his eyes lit up as he remembered there was an old hand dug well nearby. The CSI unit soon determined that the water in the well was at least 3 meters deep. They suspended another machine over the well. The operator was studying the image on a viewer. After a few minutes of analysis, he turned to us and said, "We have 2 bodies down there." I immediately called the chief with the news. He congratulated us and said he would make some calls. He needed to assemble a team to recover the bodies. Hopefully, they could be at the scene by tomorrow. He told me to report to the ranch tomorrow at dawn. The team would report to me as soon as they arrived. I thanked him for his confidence in me. Crime scene tape was placed around the well and the car before we went home. I anticipated a very busy day tomorrow, but my thoughts soon returned to the 6 condoms. As my duties were finished for the day, I had 2 extra hours for shopping. I stopped at the electronics store on my way home. I came out with 4 smoke detectors equipped with audio and video. They looked exactly like the ones they were going to replace in our house. I also had a base to record the evidence from those devices. I got home more than an hour before Estelle arrived. I used the time wisely. All the devices were in place when she arrived. I would soon know the answer to the mystery of the 6 condoms. It could be nothing, or it could be the end of my marriage. When Estella came home, I covered any condom-related anxiety by talking about being assigned as the lead detective in the reopened case, where a teacher and her student had disappeared simultaneously. Estelle seemed very interested in everything that happened at the ranch. I watched her closely all night, but I saw nothing out of the ordinary in her behavior. She was relaxed, happy, and affectionate. She showed no signs of guilt or remorse. I started to wonder if the condoms really came from the neighborhood kids. I spent several hours that night refreshing my memory on the Alice and Jerry case. I always suspected the 2 were having relations. As I read the case files, I discovered a memo from the school administrator mentioning that Jerry had asked Alice for help with problems related to dating girls. At that moment, I knew he had led her into dangerous territory. After digesting every piece of evidence in the file, I concluded that Alice had finally realized she was too involved with Jerry. He had transformed a teacher-student relationship into an adult relationship. He had become a danger to her entire family if it ever came to light. She knew what she had to do, and she did it. When it was time for bed, I was determined to make love to Estella. I needed to see how she would react to me. It turned out she was not very interested. Her mind seemed to be elsewhere. She made the right sounds and said the right words, but her body spoke differently. Her actions confirmed my suspicions. Now it was the hidden devices that would tell the story. Now that I think about it, her ardor had waned for a month or so. I had not given it much thought until now. Those condoms had put me on high alert. I decided to make tonight a double. We did not usually have relations twice very often anymore, but I wanted to see if she would reject me. She did not. But her participation in that second event was even more listless than the first. Normally, we enjoyed at least 15 minutes of afterglow, but this time, after we finished, I simply pulled away, jumped out of bed, and headed for the bathroom. When I got back in bed, I turned my back to her. She tried to reach for me, but I did not respond. On Thursday, watching the assembled team, they recovered the bodies, which were then taken to the lab to complete the identification process. I spoke extensively with the CSI team, and they were convinced it was a murder-suicide situation. We agreed on that and on all aspects of the case. It was finally over. I got home about an hour late that night, as I had several reports to file and needed to participate in a preliminary press conference. The chief gave me Friday off as a reward for solving the case. When I got home that night, I explained the day's activities to Estella, but I did not tell her about my reward of a day off. I intended to take it the next day and use it to work on solving the case that seemed to be happening in my own home. At bedtime, I tried to pick up where we had left off the night before. To my surprise, Estella excused herself, saying she was not in the mood. That set my mind racing. Was she not in the mood because she was already satisfied before today? The next morning, after Estelle left, I made another raid on the trash can. This time I found nothing, not a single condom. My next stop was the camera base station to see what had happened in our house the previous day, which was Thursday. There was a short recording made by the device in the living room and a longer one made by the similar device in the guest bedroom. I sat down and watched my marriage fall apart. The video started by showing the living room. The first thing of interest was when Estella answered the door shortly after 1 in the afternoon. She let a couple of guys in, kissing them as they entered. I was able to identify the guys immediately. They had visited us during the summer. She had introduced me to them, and we had spent some time in casual conversation. Later, she took them for a swim in our pool. I had suffered some cuts on my arms and chest during an arrest that week, and some of the wounds were still bandaged. I did not want to get the bandages wet or risk an infection, so I stayed inside watching some sports on TV. I did not give them a second thought, and certainly did not suspect any foul play. After all, those two guys were her cousins. Back in the living room. Only a few minutes passed in their conversation when I heard them reminiscing about their swim in our pool, the same thing I had been remembering. Estella recalled that they had carefully hidden in an area of the pool that was not visible from the windows. As I said, I suspected nothing at the time. I still have trouble understanding that episode. Did this just start in our pool, or had they done it before? Were they meeting up when Estella and I were dating? Something does not add up. Not that it matters. They are 3 consenting adults, one of whom just happens to be my wife. Their conversations revealed more interesting information. The cousins were now at the state university, about 80 kilometers away. After hearing it mentioned, I remembered they had talked about it when they were here for their pool weekend. Neither of the cousins had classes on Tuesday or Thursday afternoons. That explained a few things. First, I now understood why Estella had suddenly changed her work schedule this fall. She used to work 4 10-hour days, from Monday to Thursday. She had switched to 3 10-hour days that fell on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Then she had 2 5-hour days that fell on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. She claimed the changes were ordered by management, but I suspect it was all done at her. She was home by noon on the days her cousins would visit. That explained everything. I thought the conversation in the living room was bad, until I saw what happened in the guest bedroom. First, they helped each other take off their clothes. Then, they began intense foreplay on the bed. One of the cousins pulled a handful of condoms from his backpack. I was surprised when Estella said, "I have good news for you guys today. I have been on the pill for 10 days now. It is safe for us to have relations without protection. I am sure we will all enjoy it even more without that layer of rubber." One of the cousins commented that he thought she was trying to have children. She said, "Jake and I are officially trying to get pregnant, but I have put that on hold for obvious reasons." "Is he okay with that?" they asked. "He has to be, since he does not know. He would be very angry if he knew I was on the pill. If he found out, it would lead to some questions I am not prepared to answer. I do not think I could live without what the 3 of us are doing, but I also do not want to lose Jakey and my marriage. This way, what he does not know will not hurt him," she continued, lamenting that it seemed I was noticing a difference in her behavior. She mentioned that the last time we had relations, when we finished, I simply went to the bathroom. The time we used to spend afterwards in a sweet act had disappeared. She continued to mention that she had been avoiding marital relations on Tuesdays and Thursdays, claiming she was not in the mood. That was true. On one hand, she was already completely satisfied, but also, she did not want to risk me noticing something that she had somehow failed to hide. She admitted that I was visibly upset by her rejections. I had never rejected her before she started participating in those encounters with her cousins. Then she mentioned that, recently, I had not even tried to initiate anything. That worried her. The video showed a lot of activity. They did everything imaginable. It made me sick. You would think that seeing those multiple actions in that video would be the main event that would lead to the end of my marriage, and it certainly played a big part. But it was the conversation after that sealed my marriage's fate. Some things she said hammered nails into the coffin. After watching the video, I called a divorce lawyer. I was able to get an appointment for Monday afternoon. I avoided Estella in every possible way all weekend. She made several attempts to get me interested in her, but I did not take the bait. There were no kisses, no hugs, no pillow talk. I was determined not to try to save a failed marriage. Finally, she decided to take the bull by the horns. She said those 3 ominous words. "Honey, we need to talk." I was ready. She started by saying she knew something was wrong. I no longer kissed her, let alone had relations. "What have I done?" she asked. "It sounds like you feel guilty about something," I replied. "I feel bad for whatever it was that has pushed you away from me. But how can I feel guilty if I do not know what I am guilty of?" she retorted. "Well, think about everything you have been doing, let us say, in the last few months. If you can identify something that might bother us, we can talk about it. If you cannot think of anything like that, then it must be my fault. Answer me this. Jake, is there something that bothers you? Have I mentioned anything, Estelle? Have I said anything that makes you think there is something that bothers me?" I inquired. "No, but it is what you have not been saying and your actions that tell me something is wrong," she sobbed. "My God, woman, you just admitted that I have not said anything to indicate that something is wrong. I asked you to search your mind for something you have done that might bother me, and you found nothing. It seems we are at some kind of crazy standoff." With that, I left the room, and she continued to sob. We continued to cohabit in the same house until we went to work on Monday. I took an extended lunch to talk to my lawyer that afternoon. I brought the video and my evidence cooler with me. After watching the video, he said we were in an advantageous position. Our state allows for filing a lawsuit for adultery. "The video proves the adultery without any doubt," he affirmed. He took the condoms from my evidence cooler and asked his assistant to take them to the lab. That would give us even more evidence. He indicated that the settlement would be a piece of cake. He said the papers would be ready by Wednesday. It was decided that I would personally serve her the papers at home. As much as I hated what she did, I would not enjoy it. I went. I guess I should have felt happy to be rid of her, but that was not what I felt. I felt betrayed, confused, and with an overwhelming regret. I loved Estella with all my heart, but I could never forget the words she had said in that video. When I got home on Monday afternoon, Estelle was as nervous as a fox in a henhouse. She apologized for not having anything for dinner. "I just took my phone and ordered pizza," she said. "I am sorry, Jake. I am so distressed. I could barely get through work today. I am a wreck. Please, forgive me for whatever I did to upset you so much." I said, "We talked about this, Estella. As I recall, you cannot think of anything you have done that should bother me, and you do not remember me complaining about anything. I think we have given up on that." Estella started to cry. I turned around, walked to my chair, and started watching a news program on PBS. She sat in her chair and watched with me. Her phone rang. She said, "Honey, I have to take this." She went to our bedroom and closed the door. I could not hear what she was saying, but I knew I had it covered with my altered smoke detectors. I connected to the base station with my laptop, grabbed my headphones, and started listening to her conversation in real time. She was talking to her cousins. She asked if they had her on speakerphone and if anyone else was with them. They affirmed that they could both hear her and that no one else was there. She said, "I have to call this off. Jake is acting very strange. I do not know what he knows, but he knows something." "Are you sure he knows something?" "Maybe he just suspects something. It does not matter. Either way, he has pushed me out of his life. We are just roommates now instead of husband and wife. He does not touch me anymore. I have to call everything off. Okay, we will skip tomorrow. Maybe things will be better by Thursday. You do not understand what I am saying. I am not canceling just tomorrow. I am canceling everything. You know that will not work, Estella. You said it yourself. You live in 2 different worlds now. You need both. I thought that was true, but one of those worlds is falling apart, and I need to put it back together. That is what I have to do. Everything else is expendable, but not my marriage. Do not show up tomorrow or any other time, unless you call first. You can visit any time as long as Jake is here, and you can swim. I have to admit, she seems to be trying to apply the brakes. However, sometimes, doing the right thing too late is just that, too late. When I got back from lunch on Tuesday, I received a call from Estella. She told me she was not going to leave early on Tuesdays and Thursdays anymore. She had told her manager that the new schedule was not working for her, and he had changed it back to 4 10-hour days, from Monday to Thursday. She just needed me to know that I should not expect her home when I arrived. I said, I thought you told me that management had imposed that change. I am surprised they are changing it back at your request, especially so quickly. I was surprised too, she replied. I thought maybe they recognized how upset I was, but it was not that. They said they had been thinking about changing it back for a while. My request just sped up the process. Well, I am glad it worked out. Thanks for letting me know. After hanging up, I started to suspect this might be a cover to move the party to another location. Maybe that phone call last night was also a setup. I knew what to do. I called her company phone. She answered on the second ring. I could hear Mary and someone else talking in the background. She was at work, as she said. I quickly recovered and said, I forgot to ask, do you want me to pick up something for takeout tonight? That would be great. Thanks for thinking of it. No problem. I will see you later. It seems her lying has turned into telling the truth, as the song goes. On the way home, as I passed by Mark's gift shop, I noticed a nice plaque in the window that said, Avoid even the appearance of impropriety. I stopped to look at it more closely. As I was examining it, Mark herself came over to help me. It was probably because I was in uniform. She had clearly read my nameplate when she said, There is a story behind that piece of merchandise, Officer Robbins. Marcy told me that the story of Janet and Brad had become something of a local legend among the flea market vendors. Janet had been looking for a way to make amends for her mistakes, and buying those signs was her way of remembering and warning others about the fragility of relationships. For Marcy, it was a story that highlighted the importance of integrity and honesty in personal relationships. When I finished listening to the story, I noticed that Marcy was almost on the verge of tears. I was surprised by the emotional impact it had had on her. In an attempt to distract her, and perhaps to change the tone of the conversation, I asked her if there was a story behind other items in her shop. She replied that there probably was, but she did not know most of the stories behind those items. Each object had its own past. Often, those pasts were filled with emotions and memories, although she did not always know all the details. I took one of the signs and gave her my credit card, saying, I will take this one. Mark will be perfect for our conference room. Mark refused my offer and said, Your money is no good here, officer. I was surprised and asked her if she was sure. She nodded her head and said, Yes, and please, do not insist. This sign is a gift for you. I thanked Mark sincerely for the gesture and headed home with the sign in hand. As I drove, I reflected on the stories things can tell and how everyday objects can have deep meanings. That night, Estella and I continued with our distant silence. As the sign adorned the wall of the conference room the next day, it reminded me not only of the importance of avoiding even the appearance of impropriety, but also of the lessons from the stories we share and the impacts of our own decisions. I told her I liked it because my boss, Sheriff Stevenson, often emphasized that point in our meetings. I said it would be a nice touch to place it in our conference room. Mark told me she had acquired 4 of those signs at one of the flea markets she regularly attended. She said, The owner told me she remembered the lady who sold those signs. She had bought them just a few weeks before, and here she was, returning them with tears in her eyes. Anyway, for those who remember Paul Harvey, Mark told me the rest of the story. Here is what she said. The woman who was selling the signs was named Janet. She had been happily married to Brad. She met Steve at a conference hosted by the company she worked for. Steve was an Army captain. It turned out they both ended up working together on a project related to the conference. As the project progressed, they became good friends. They had lunch together every day. When Brad saw them having lunch at the Hilton, he warned her to stop seeing Steve outside the office. She ignored that warning. In fact, not only did they continue with those lunches, but they even took a couple of day trips together. Soon, it started to look more and more like an emotional affair. After the conference ended and Steve was gone, Brad was still upset. He initiated a confrontation in the presence of their children. Janet swore that the relationship had never become physical and that she did not commit adultery. She did not realize that Brad had hired a private investigator. Between what Brad discovered on his own and what he learned from the investigator, he was sure that at least Janet had had an emotional affair. Most likely, it was also an adulterous affair. Anyway, Brad could no longer trust her. That led Brad to accept an assignment in a foreign country with his company for a month. He would try to use that month to reflect on Janet and their marriage. He needed time alone to digest what he knew and choose the appropriate course of action. Fortunately, their children were in college. They might be upset if his decision led to divorce, but they would understand. While Brad was away, Janet passed by a gift shop and saw 4 signs there that displayed a very appropriate message. Avoid even the appearance of impropriety. In the deepest corners of her mind, she admitted that, although she had not had a physical affair, she might have had an emotional one. If she followed those words of wisdom, she could avoid that problem in the future. She bought the 4 signs and placed them in strategic places in the house. One was on the wall at the foot of her bed. It was the first thing she saw every morning and the last thing she saw every night. Unfortunately, those signs never proved useful. She received a call from Brad a few days before he was due to return home. The call was not at all what she expected. Brad's first words were, "What are you playing at? While I am here trying to figure out how to preserve our marriage, you are still pursuing your affair." She said, "What are you talking about? I have not been in contact with Steve since he left. He was scheduled for duty in Europe. He is there now. There was no affair before, and there certainly is not one now," she cried. He replied, "Janet, maybe I was born at night, but it was not last night. I decided to get an update on your captain before making my final decision about us. I am surrounded by military troops here, and I know some pretty influential officers. I asked the question, and I got the answer. Your captain did not go to Europe, he went to Fort Knox. So let us see. It is about an hour's drive from your house. How often does he make that trip? How often do you?" She wanted to tell him she did not believe what he was saying, and that she had never made any trips, nor had Steve, but Brad raised his voice and dominated the conversation. He did not allow her to interrupt. He said, "Janet, I have accepted a permanent position here. I have filed for divorce. I am asking for a 50-50 split of our assets, except for your car and the house. You take them completely. I do not think you can get a better offer than that. Go see your captain and celebrate tonight. Sign the papers when they arrive." With that, he hung up the phone. After a long cry, she called the personnel department at Fort Bragg. He was right. Captain Steve Snow was indeed stationed there. He had been there for a few weeks. Shortly after, she was making that trip, and so was Steve. She also went back to that gift shop and returned the 4 signs. She was doing the only possible thing, but she still had tears in her eyes. It marked the end of something good that she failed to protect. On the day her divorce was finalized, Steve's ring replaced Brad's on her finger. It was a goodbye to Brad and a hello to Steve. She had insisted on waiting until her marriage was over for the night to be more than special. Now that Brad was officially out of her life, she resented that he had not believed her. She could have been getting into bed with him that night instead of with Steve. It was Brad's decision, and he made it without giving her a chance. She did not need a sign to remind her how fragile a marriage can be. She would follow that message and do everything possible to protect her second chance for a lasting union. When the story ended, I thought Mark was going to cry. When I got home, I hung the sign in a place where anyone who walked through our front door could see it. That would be Estella in about an hour. In the meantime, I connected my computer to the big screen TV in the living room. It was time to illuminate the darkness in our marriage. It was time to make a clean break. But first, she needs to know what she has lost. When she came home, she saw my patrol car in the driveway. Flying through the door, she said, "Honey, you are home early." I saw her in the hallway. She was looking at the sign. It was as if she was frozen in place. Her face was the picture of concern as she pointed at the sign and asked, "Did you buy this for me?" I told her it was a favorite phrase of my boss. I told her it applied to me, and yes, it applied to her too. Then, I asked, "Would you like to go out for dinner tonight?" She said that would be fine. She just wanted to change her clothes. She asked where we were going, but I told her it was a surprise. I knew this would be our last night out together. I had made reservations at the steakhouse where I proposed to her. You could not just go there on a whim, so she would not suspect we were going there. It would be a surprise, a good surprise, but far from the last surprise I would give her that night. Yes, she was pleasantly surprised. We talked about how important this place had been in our past. That led to reminiscing about so many things that meant a lot to us. As the conversation progressed, I found it difficult to maintain a good mood. I knew everything was ending, but she did not seem to perceive a change in me. She started to look worried. By the time we went home, she seemed scared. When we got home, I suggested we watch a movie in the living room. That seemed to alleviate some of her anxiety. She made popcorn while I chose the movie. We sat together on the sofa. My computer started streaming video to the big screen TV. The first scene showed the three of them talking in bed. They were naked. She was telling them how great it had been since they stopped using condoms. My eyes left the video and focused on her. She seemed to be in a state of shock. She kept saying, "Oh God. Oh no, 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 no. This, turn it off, honey. Please, stop it." I had inserted stop points at various places in the video. At that moment, she rushed to the TV and unplugged the cord. She said, "I know it looks bad. It is bad, but not for you or for our marriage. It is not infidelity. Infidelity is destructive because the cheater pulls away from there. I am not in love with my cousins. I am sure you know in your heart that there is no danger of me leaving you for them. As bad as you think this is just sex. It does not even come close to love. I am sure you realize that it is not a threat to what you and I have. I love you more than ever. I have been your wife in every way while this was happening." I shouted at her, "Have you really been like that? What about all those times you told me you were not in the mood? You never did that until the thing started. I did it out of respect for you, honey. I did not want to give you seconds. They would never be sloppy. I make sure our marriage, even if I could ignore those acts, I cannot ignore the words you said. It is what you said afterwards that doomed us. Do you not think that having relations is an important part of our marriage? Do you not think that I value pleasing you very much?" "Of course, Jake. I know it is a big part of our marriage. It has always been great. You have always been a great partner, honey. Never doubt your prowess." "I do not." I told her I knew she was lying to me. As she kept saying how much she enjoyed having relations with me, I fast-forwarded the video to the last stop point. It showed the conversation that took place after the activities. Estella was talking. "You guys have ruined me. After what we do, having relations with Jake is just boring. I do not like it anymore. It is more like inadequate foreplay. When I am in bed with him nowadays, I just try to finish as quickly as possible. I am trying not to screw up by revealing how uninterested I am in having relations with him. Poor Jake. I think he senses something is not right. The last time we were together, after my first faked orgasm, he wanted to go again. I tried to get affectionate with him. It helps me show him how much I still love him. He was determined for another round, so I faked it again. When he finished, he just got out of bed without even a minute of the affection I have always cherished. I think I need to become a better actress. I better step up my game with him. It will be hard to fake an intense reaction to such boring relations, but I need to do it. If I do not, I could lose Jake. I cannot let that happen." Her cousins asked her if she was sure that I would not be interested in joining them. She said, "I have told you over and over again that my husband is not interested in any kind of kinky stuff. He does not approve of unconventional relations of any kind. He would never approve of what I am doing, let alone participate in it. He must never find out about us. The moment he finds out, I can kiss my marriage goodbye." I turned to Estella and said, "You knew how I felt about those weird acts, but you did them anyway. For me, our sex life has always been an important part of our marriage. So now you say that your unorthodox, strange, and extravagant activities have overshadowed and ruined your enjoyment with me. The conventional relations you share with me cannot meet your new expectations. How do you think I can continue in this marriage knowing how you feel about my way of making love? In the future, whenever you deign to be with me, I will be thinking about what you said. Those words will never leave my mind. Well, do not worry about faking it with me anymore. You will not have to." With that, I opened my briefcase and handed her the envelope containing the divorce papers. I said, "You have been served. It is a typical equal division document that covers everything we have accumulated together. However, you should hire a lawyer to protect your interests. From now on, the discussion should be between your lawyer and mine. The movers took all my belongings while we were having our last dinner. So the impediment, known as Jake, has been removed from your life. I will no longer be between you and your lovers. I will not disappoint you with a conventional farewell kiss. Enjoy your freedom to sleep with whomever you please. Goodbye, Estella. As I walked towards the door, she ran and hugged me around the waist in a bear hug. She sobbed. I did not mean any of that about being with you being boring or conventional. I have already put an end to what I was doing. It is over, honey. It is not going to happen again. I kept walking towards my car, dragging her across the sidewalk. She did not want to let go. Our neighbor, Sue, ran over and asked what was happening. Estella started telling her we were going through a rough patch. As they talked, I took the opportunity to run to my car and get out of there. I saw her in the rearview mirror. She was running behind my car and waving her hands. I turned the corner and she disappeared from my sight and from my life. Estella tried to interact with me twice. Once, she came to my door and said she had an idea of how we could get back together. I told her, "Do not waste your breath, Estella." She left crying. The next encounter occurred after the divorce was finalized. I was in my patrol car, stopped at a red light. She pulled up in the lane next to me. When she saw it was me, she waved. I ignored her. When the traffic cleared a bit, she sped up and crossed the intersection. The light was still red. It was all I could do not to turn on my lights, pull her over, and write a ticket. The cop in me wanted to do it, but the ex-husband in me did not want to be forced to talk to her. The ex-husband won. It was the first anniversary of the finalization of our divorce. Kelly and I were sitting by the fireplace, eating popcorn and watching a movie on Netflix. She is a social worker. Our paths crossed professionally several times on cases that fell within our shared jurisdiction. It was when we both volunteered to serve Christmas dinner to the underprivileged that we got to know each other better. When we finished serving, we, along with the other servers, sat down to dinner. Since we had been working together, we decided to eat together as well. Our conversation was very pleasant, and we discovered we had many things in common. That conversation led to us dating. Dating led to love. Right now, we are in an exclusive relationship. After our movie ended, there was a knock on the door. I looked through the peephole and saw a courier from ACM Services. We use that service at work, so when I opened the door, I assumed it was a work-related delivery. After signing, I saw it was from Estella. I opened the package and began to read. Jake, for the last time, I want to tell you how sorry I am for ruining our marriage. When you were leaving, I told you I had put an end to the episodes with my cousins, and I had. When you left, I was devastated. I began to sink into despair. I knew I had to get out of it. My way out of it was to call my cousins and tell them I was ready to pick up where we left off. They informed me that they had already arranged something with a girl named Frida. Then they surprised me by telling me that she would be delighted if I joined them. They said she was a girl from the equator. Sensing my confusion, they told me that she often crossed the line between hemispheres. I finally understood. I told them I had never considered performing activities with another woman. I thought about it for a couple of minutes before saying, "What the hell? I am willing to try anything." Our team consisted of 4 guys and 2 girls. We saw a long season and played all imaginable games. I became an ambidextrous hitter. I tried both sides and loved them both. After the sale of our house, when I moved into an apartment, I began to realize how much I had lost when you left. While living in our house, I could convince myself that you would eventually walk through the door. When I moved into an apartment, I knew you would never come back. I began to lose interest in the team. I began to see it for what it was, complete depravity. Finally, I quit the team. Actually, I was fired for failure to perform. Anyway, it ended. You know, if I had paid more attention in English class, I could write a book, or at least an article, about what I have learned. First, the old saying about nipping things in the bud is correct. I should have stopped it from the beginning. I should never have allowed that depravity in our pool. Before that, I was completely satisfied with our sex life. Everything changed in just a few minutes. And our pool of fantasy was born, and it took over the very center of my mind. It was never truly repelled or conquered. At that very moment, my ruin became inevitable. I needed more. When I got more, it was never enough. I lied to you when I said they meant nothing. The things I said to my cousins, those words that bothered you so much, I am ashamed to say that what I told them was the truth. I meant every one of those words you hated. I was in the bowels of hell, and there was no way back. My marriage is over. My life is over. I will never be a wife again. I will never have a baby to love. No little ray of joy will call me mom. Everything is gone. There is no way back. The only way out is to have never entered. There is another old saying that applies to us. It is as wrong as the previous one was right. It says, actions speak louder than words. That is nonsense. It was not what I did that resulted in an irremediable marriage. It was the words I said. It was those words that were indelibly etched in your mind that sealed my fate. We could never go back to normal as long as those words were between us. Words matter. I am leaving everything, the good and the bad, and I am leaving. I will never cross your door again. You will never have to look at what your wife became again. If I could go back and change everything, I would do it in a heartbeat. Life does not work that way. I wish you the best. I hope that if you ever think of me, you will only remember the good times. We had it all, Jake, until I destroyed it. In the process, I destroyed myself. Finally, with much appreciation, respect, and, yes, enduring love, I say goodbye to you forever, Stell. Kelly was reading over my shoulder and became concerned. She turned to me, saying, "You know what this is, right? It is a suicide note. You cannot let this happen, honey." I took her hand and declared, "I am completely out of the picture and I do not want to get back in." In the enduring words of Rhett Butler, "Frankly, my dear, I do not give a damn." This story tells us about the fragility of relationships, how important honesty and respect for oneself and for the people around us are.